we can't reoccupy in a meaningful fashion the bases that have been largely destroyed by Iran. So now you have to ask yourself as a military guy, how do I accomplish my mission with reduced infrastructure? Where do I relocate my forces? And this is what's happening. We're pulling back to Jordan, to air bases in Jordan. We're pulling into Saudi Arabia, and we're pulling some assets into Israel, and we're pulling some assets into Europe. Crete, Cyprus, Bulgaria, Romania. We're moving in that direction. This is just a temporary thing, though, because then the question is, what is our military mission? And that is where politics comes into play. I believe that there's a recognition that we cannot sustain a conflict with Iran over time. And I also think that there's a recognition that the United States lacks the capacity to reorient the totality of its military infrastructure so that we could have the ability to project into the Middle East meaningful military power capable of solving the problems that we can't solve today, like seizure of the Strait of Hormuz, occupation of Iran's nuclear facilities, and the elimination of Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. We don't have a military solution to those problems, which means that it's irresponsible to say that that's now our military mission. I think the military mission will be redefined based upon strategic political objectives. And right now, the first strategic political objective is, how do we get out of the Middle East in the least disruptive way? How do we get out of the Middle East in the least disruptive way? And one way is through retrograde operations towards Europe, meaning we move towards Jordan and Israel. But that's not sustainable. I mean, what is Jordan? Is Jordan part of Europe? Is Jordan part of the Middle East, of West Asia? And of course, they're part of Middle East and West Asia, which means eventually Jordan will have to gravitate towards this. This is what happened in, when we talked about Syria and Iraq and American military presence in Syria. I always said the moment Iraq becomes unsustainable, Syria is resolved. And look what happened. Iraq became unsustainable. We're out of Syria in a heartbeat. Solved its problem. Kuwait's now unsustainable. We're out of Iraq. And now that, which means we're out of Bahrain. Logistically unsustainable. Can't happen. So we'll fall back. Saudi Arabia, I don't know how much longer we're going to be there, but, Saudi Arabia has begun to look elsewhere for its strategic security requirements. It now has this pact with Turkey and Pakistan. There are alternatives to American weaponry out there that Saudi Arabia can buy into if necessary. We have energy issues that, even though we're not buying Saudi energy today, it impacts the global energy security market. So we may hold on to Saudi Arabia, hold on to a military posture. So Saudi Arabia, I just remind the people they can't fight. Just remember that. It's not like, when we withdraw from Saudi Arabia, the Saudi army is going, we got this, boss. We got it. We're the Saudi army. We're strong. We lift weights every day. We run 6 miles with heavy weights on our back. We're ready to fight. No, these are the fat guys that get wiped out by Ansarallah every time they go head to head. All right. And Saudi Arabia knows that if they're left exposed, they're going to lose southern Saudi Arabia. Southern Saudi Arabia used to be part of Yemen. And the Yemeni may decide to come and take it. I know during the Gulf War, in the run-up in the fall of 1990, we sent the 7th Marine Amphibious Brigade to Saudi Arabia, Eastern Saudi Arabia, and they set up. We're going to stop the Iraqis if they come down. So we got one brigade of Marines. I think we had another brigade of airborne out there someplace, and we're going up against several divisions of the Iraqi Republican Guard. Now, Marines are pretty damn good, Nima, and I will never shy away from a fight. Give me a K-bar, I'll take on a tank any day of the year, but I'll die. They'll give me a medal, bury me nicely, whatever remains of me. But Marines aren't going to run away from a fight. But we knew what we were. We were speed bumps. If the Iraqis had decided to drive south, there was nothing we could do to stop them. Straight up reality. So we're sitting there going, hey, Saudi Arabia, by the way, we're in your country to help you. And you got this army down there hanging out by the Yemeni border. Why don't you bring some of those brigades up here, at least pretend like you want to fight with us and die with us to defend your country? And the Saudis were going, no, because those are Yemenis. We're scared of them. We're not leaving our border unprotected. This is the reality. So Saudi Arabia has to deal with the Yemen problem. Now, Pakistan, there was some talk a couple years ago, I think, where Saudi Arabia, made a big deal about getting the Pakistanis to deploy one of their divisions to help out in Yemen. And the Pakis said no. And that caused a little bit of a brouhaha. But Saudi Arabia is dependent upon Pakistan for manpower at the officer rank especially. And what we could see, as long as it doesn't involve the deployment of Pakistani troops into Yemen, because I think Pakistan will reject that, but we could see with this new pact where Pakistani troops come in and help, secure Saudi's border with Yemen, and this might give the Saudi Arabians more confidence, and maybe the Pakistani Air Force can come in and help reinforce the Saudi Air Force and the security of Saudi airspace. And when that happens, then and Turkey, because here's another big one. People never think about this, but I'll ask you: how many? Let's just do some basic questions. Is Qatar and Saudi Arabia, are they friends? And the answer is no, not at all. Has Saudi Arabia threatened Qatar militarily in the past?
Yeah.
How many troops does Turkey maintain on Qatari soil? Thousands. Why? To protect Qatar from Saudi Arabia. But I thought Turkey and Saudi Arabia just signed a defense pact. See, it's not as easy as it looks, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually a pretty complicated situation. I think once the Saudis and the Turks can actually resolve some of their regional differences, Saudi Arabia will feel confident enough to tell the Americans to leave. But in the meantime, America is one giant security blanket. I mean, I used to have a blanket when I was a kid. It's still one of the most traumatic moments of my life. I had this blanket, and it was my little blanket. And I carried that blanket everywhere. I was just sitting there sucking my thumb with my blanket. And I had that blanket as a child. And I remember I got to kindergarten, I had that blanket. And I'm moving into first grade. And this blanket is no longer a blanket because I used to pick at the fuzz too. That was my thing. I had the blanket. I would pick at the fuzz, make little fuzz balls and all that. And one day my mom came in and saw this threadbare thing on there. And she said, no. And she threw that blanket away. Boom, my world ended. I mean, that was it. I no longer had my blanket. It was just impossible for me to live. Now, eventually I grew up and got away with it. But the United States is that security blanket to Saudi Arabia. And right now it's sort of threadbare. Saudi Arabia's been picking the fuzz at it. But they still need that blanket to go to bed tonight. They still suck their thumb. At some point in time, in order to get rid of that blanket, they're going to have something else that's going to replace it. And is it going to be this pact, this Turkish-Pakistani pact? I don't know, because there's some inherent problems. Again, Pakistan's already told the Saudis to pound sand when it comes to providing troops to resolve the Yemen situation. What kind of ally does that? And Turkey's got troops deployed to Qatar to fight the Saudis in case they make a move on Qatar. What kind of ally is that? So this isn't what it all seems to be, everybody. We know it's not about Iran. Everybody said, even the Iranians are like, that doesn't bother us. But what's it about? Israel? Or it's just about they don't know what to do because there's now a psychological vacuum in the security realm because the United States has got their butts handed to them by the Iranians. And everybody's going, how do we live going on? So they're trying to construct something. We'll see. But eventually, I believe the United States will have to leave Saudi Arabia as well because Saudi Arabia is no longer going to be focused, gravitated towards the United States. They're going to be shifting their focus of attention elsewhere, but they've got a lot of problems they have to resolve. Remember what I said earlier about letting Mother Nature run its course? You know who's pretty good at that? One of the best Mother Nature practitioners of foreign policy in the world today, China. China's pretty good about just saying, let it happen. Let's see what happens. See, you know how China does, you know what BRICS is? I mean, not BRICS, but BRI? Belt and Road Initiative. Belt and Roads Initiative, yeah. It's the equivalent I talked about in my college. See, China's got this big, giant, hypothetical satellite above there taking a picture of the global economy. And they look at it and they go, I don't have to invent trade routes. They exist. I just need to take control of them. Build a port here, build a port there, connectivity, things flow through naturally. Why don't we do this? So if you take a look at Belt and Roads Initiative and look at how China has overlaid its thing, it's all done upon the natural flow of the global economy. China's not trying to force anything. China's just taking advantage of what exists and making it function even better. I mean, look what they just did. Nobody's talking about it too much, but China set up this company now that is doing scheduled service from Chinese ports into Europe using the Northeast Passage around Russia. It 20 days, I think, is what it takes, as opposed to 40 plus days. So it cut the time in half. Costs are lower. It's just the Chinese doing it better than anybody else. On a scale. I mean, anybody can say, well, I ran a ship through there. Well, China's just running a ship. They're running ships. That's a big line, giant container ships going through, taking advantage of Russia's 43 icebreakers, including several nuclear power icebreakers. And China's on good relations with the Russians, which means that their icebreaker fees are going to be lower, and they lower the cost to do it. It's just called letting. The Chinese are really good at this. And the Chinese right now, when they look at the Middle East, remember, they got the Saudis and the Iranians to have a rapprochement once, because it's the natural course of things. See, the United States is the antithesis of the natural course of things. We try to create friction. We purposely create friction so that we have nations fighting each other, because we've decided it's best to sell weapons and permanently keep the region unstable. But what happened there? It leads to a Strait of Hormuz type situation, which isn't just bad for America, bad for the world, bad for the region. In the United States now is the problem, not the solution. So what is the solution? Stop trying to force things. Let Mother Nature run its course, and it will happen. And the Chinese, when that happens, the Chinese sort of moving, because they're the best in the world at saying, hey, let's let it run its course. They'll figure out what's the best pathway and all this stuff, and things will run at maximum efficiency. That's your solution. Get the United States the hell out of there, especially with this current leadership.
Scott, you've mentioned the psychological vacuum. I think that perfectly fits this situation that Saudi Arabia is in right now. And the other point is those blankets that you mentioned, this American blanket or a Turkish blanket, these blankets are not going to save them from the Yemeni attacks. This is the problem for Saudi Arabia. And just moments ago, before coming to this live, Yemen, they have published a new statement. It says that a blockade for a blockade. It says that your blockade, we're going to respond to your blockade with a blockade on you. And they said not a single Saudi, ship has passed through the Bab el-Mandab, and they're going to continue that until this situation going to come down or resolved. This is the problem that Saudi Arabia has created for itself, and nobody can resolve it for them.
But Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, I can't answer the question. Why did Saudi Arabia go into Yemen to begin? Now we know why, because the Ansarallah overthrew the Yemeni government, which was a pro-Saudi government, and that's linked to policies that Saudi Arabia has been using to try and impose itself on Yemen for years and all that stuff. But the problem was always Saudi Arabia. The problem has always been Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia pictured itself as a regional military superpower. Look at why does the UAE do what it does in Africa? Because it's in competition with Saudi Arabia, that's seeking to make itself a regional power by controlling various governments and resource intensive regions, and UAE's responded by trying to take control of ports and things like that. So there's this regional superpower competition taking place that's created a problem in Sudan. It's bled over into Chad. It's bleeding over elsewhere. It doesn't need to happen. I mean, if the Saudis would just take a cue from, China and just let it happen, baby. First of all, you don't have to be at war with Yemen. Just treat them with respect. And if you treat them with respect, it's going to be amazing what's going to happen, because Saudi Arabia, because of its position as a major energy producer, has the ability to influence, the economy of the region, unlike any other nation. I mean, similar to Iran. And again, if you let Saudi Arabia and Iran peacefully coexist, a natural balance will occur. A natural balance will occur. Instead of trying to impose your will, accept what the natural balance is, and then make that thrive, knowing that there are limitations to what you can do. But both, Saudi Arabia and I would say Iran has to be careful not to become guilty of this, is seeking to make their reach greater than it naturally should be. There are things, that the natural flow of events allow, a nation with a specific population, resources, et cetera, to say this is our, what should be our normative sphere of influence. Saudi Arabia could do the same thing. They can resolve the Yemeni solution simply by respecting Yemen instead of trying to impose their will on Yemen. And they could stop, seeking military competition in Africa and work with United Arab Emirates to, come up with, an equitable economic relate. And the Chinese are good at this. If people would just let the economy drive things as opposed to trying to, bully your way in with weaponry. I mean, one of the problems with building the military is then you feel the temptation to use the military. And, people spend more money on, economic development, infrastructure development, less money on the military, invested in diplomacy instead of, military academies. We might find the pieces breaking out all over the place and everybody's going to be doing all right, but that's the whole thing about the Saudis right now is they need to accept that there are limits to what they can do. Now, there's some complications with Saudi Arabia just by the nature of the regime. I mean, we can never forget how Saudi Arabia was created, the deal with the devil. The Al Saud family sat down with the Wahhabists and said, Mecca Medina belongs to this extreme faction of head choppers, and they get to dictate things. And in order to bleed off, prevent the Wahhabis from holding the Saudis, the Saud family accountable for its extravagant non-Islamic lifestyle, we export Wahhabism abroad as part of our foreign policy. So Saudi Arabia's got some inherent problems of its own that can't be resolved if Saudi Arabia continues to exist the way that it exists. I mean, either the Saudi family has to go or the Wahhabists have to go, but the two aren't going to be able to peacefully coexist with one another for too much longer. Be that as it may, Saudi Arabia doesn't need to be, how we talk about Ukraine being bled to death by the West as a foil against Russia? Saudi Arabia needs to wake up and understand that the United States has been using Saudi Arabia as a foil against Iran. And that we don't care about Saudi Arabia. We don't. And that if worst case, we'd allow Saudi Arabia to ground down to nothing. Saudi Arabia is meaningless to us. And the Saudis should wake up and understand that the blanket they have isn't actually a blanket, a security blanket. It's it's a prison. It's a blanket that the United States uses to wrap it around you and hold you and get you addicted to and everything like that. We don't care about Saudi. We don't care about anybody in the Middle East except Israel. And even then, we don't really care about Israel. We're compelled to care about Israel by, different issues. But as soon as people realize that, every Arab leader that wakes up and says, I'm a friend and ally of America. No, you're not. We don't like you. That is, we hate you. Look at America. Look at the reality of America today. I wouldn't want to be a Muslim living in America. I mean, I just finished having, I spent a weekend with great people in Long Island, New York, and in New Jersey, Islamic community, both Shia and Sunni. They came together over the occasion of Ashura and Arba'in, to talk about, what Karbala means to, the Islamic world. And these are peace-loving people, educated people. They're good citizens. They care. They care about things like the Constitution. But the reality is the vast majority of Americans don't even know who these people are, what they stand for. They don't want to know. We're wrapped in, this ignorance that we allow people like Laura Loomer and Sarah Adams and others just to promulgate this Islamophobia. And so, we don't even love the Muslims that live in America, Americans, loyal Americans. You think we love Saudis? We don't even know who the Saudis are. You think we love the Yemenis? We don't even know who they are. We couldn't tell you what a Jordanian is. We couldn't tell you what a Syrian is. I mean, when we speak of Syria, are we speaking of the Maronites? Are we speaking of the Sunnis? Are we speaking of the Alawites? Are we speaking about the Druze? Most Americans, what? We can get up to Sinjar and talk about the Yazidis. What are you talking about? They don't know anything. We couldn't talk about the tribes. We couldn't talk about the different tribes that populate the Syrian desert that have to migrate through the Anbar Desert down into Saudi Arabia and how they've been doing that. And they're really, they view themselves as, Bedouin or Arabs as opposed to Syrian, Iraqi, Saudi. None of this crosses our mind. We don't know the history of, how Sunni and Shia faith began. I have to be educated on a constant basis. I talked about the Battle of Karbala, and I said, it was the Shia under Hussein that were squared off against the Sunni of Yazid. There were no Shia during the Battle of Karbala, and there were no Sunni in the Battle of Karbala. There were Muslims that believed in the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad, called them what became the Shia, and the Muslims that had allowed the corrupt, Umayyad Caliphate to corrupt Islamic principles, call those the people who supported Yazid. But there was no Sunni and Shia. There was no Sufism at that time. The mystical aspect of it that transcends both Sunni and Shia faith. But the average American doesn't know this. And so if you're in the Middle East and you wake up and you go, America's my friend. No, we're not your friend. We despise you. We openly despise you. We mock you behind your back. We have the world's worst names for you. We don't even want to understand who you are or what you are. You are a resource to be expended to our benefit exclusively. We want your energy, and that's it. We want your energy on terms that are solely acceptable to us. We don't care about the price you pay, the sacrifice you make. We damn sure don't care about your women and children. We'll slaughter them in a heartbeat, and we've proven that. So when is the Middle East going to wake up? When are they going to wake up and understand that the single greatest threat to Middle Eastern peace and stability is the United States of America, and stop viewing us as your friend? We are not your friend. A friend would never do to you what we are doing to you. A friend would never ask his friend to burn his house down. And yet that's what we're asking the Middle East to do for our exclusive benefit. Burn down your house. And it's not like we have a plan to rebuild your house or resettle you. Burn down your house. Why? Because it's good for us. But it's not good for me. But I don't care about you. The truth has come out. America as a nation, collectively, we want the Middle East to burn down their own house because it gives us short-term gain. If I lived in the Middle East, I would reject the United States in totality. That doesn't mean reject the American people. Because even though we're ignorant, we're not that bad. So I'm not saying go out there, kidnap Americans, and behead them. Please don't do that. Fact is, if you actually met your average American, you say, you guys aren't too bad. You're just stupid. And hopefully we'd be honest enough to go, yeah, we're pretty stupid. Maybe we need to learn a little bit more about the world we live in. How about get a passport, get some money, and go visit the Middle East and learn about it? I'm doing that next year, by the way. I'm going to Karbala. I'm going to participate in Arbaeen. Why? Not because I'm Muslim, but I really want to know more about the Islamic faith. I want to learn more about the Shia faith, not because I want to become one of them, because I want to live in peace with them. I want to live in harmony with them. And the best way to live in peace and harmony with people is to actually learn about them. And the best way to learn about them is to be with them, be among them. That's what I do in Russia. I go and I be among the Russian people. I learn, I listen. I'll go anywhere in the world. I hope to be able to get to Iran at some point in time. We just have to find a way to do it without put me in jail. But when we figure that one out, it'll happen. But that's the best way to resolve issues, is just learn about people, understand them. It doesn't mean you surrender to them, you're subordinated to them. I'm not me. I'm not going to bend the knee to anybody. But I don't. Why should I live in a world where that's my option? Stand tall or bend the knee. How about stand next to each other, extend a helping hand, and say, "Hey, how you doing?" I mean, that's what I do. I do these challenge coins when I go to Russia. Every time I go on a trip, I do a challenge coin. But you see what's there? What's prominent? It's the shaking of hands. When I first went to Russia in May of 2023, basically my motto was one handshake at a time. I mean, I'm going to go to Russia and convince Russians that Americans aren't a threat. And I'm going to do that one handshake at a time. I'm going to go to as many Russians as possible, put out my hand and shake their hand and say, "Hi, I'm Scott Ritter. I'm an American. It's a pleasure to meet you." want to learn more about your country so that we can live together in peace and harmony. One handshake at a time. That's just that, it's just simplistic, but it really is the solution. But if you're not willing to do that, then you're the problem, not the solution. If you're not willing to go out there and extend your hand and meet people, talk to people, and learn about people, and figure out how to live in peace and harmony, then you're the problem, not the solution. And right now, America's the problem collectively.
Scott, before wrapping up, we had an Israeli attack on Syria, and they're talking about the Turkish military is building up something in Syria. That's why there's so much concern about that. They want to reduce the power of Turkey in Syria. And you see the reaction from Donald Trump and his administration. For example, Tom Brock was so much anxious about what is happening. Nothing is happening. It's dangerous. We have to calm down. We have to talk. We have to do this and that. But Israel doesn't want that. Israel doesn't want to calm everything. They don't want to reduce the tensions. They want to increase the tensions, because this is one of the games for Israelis, to keep these conflicts back and forth in order to get the United States involved more and more in the West Asia.
Well, it's not just, I wouldn't say it's the game of the Israelis. I'd say it's the game of Netanyahu. This is a game that Netanyahu has been playing for some time now to, posture as the security prime minister. I'm the only guy that cares about security. We saw that after October 7th. Again, there's so much wrong about October 7th. There we go. Damn right, Scott. Hamas went across the border and slaughtered those innocent Israelis. That's not what I'm talking about. So much wrong about the Israeli behavior on October 7th. The intelligence failure, the leadership failure of that. And there hasn't been a full, accounting for what happened in the lead up to October 7th, how it was allowed to happen, and how Israel responded after that. Of course, we know there's a problem, because what happened on October 7th is the Israelis said, okay, we're going to resolve the problem of Gaza once and for all. And they implemented policies that led to the genocide, the ongoing genocide that's taking place to this day. And that became a policy failure for Israel. Yes, they're very good at killing Palestinians, but they weren't very good at solving the Palestinian problem. Hamas still exists. They haven't defeated them. They're not going to defeat them. So then you have to expand the fight into Lebanon. Now they're going to take on Hezbollah. And, Israel, of course, does its thing. Pagers blow up, and the middle management gets weakened. They assassinate Hassan Nasrallah. They kill some senior management, and Hezbollah has to take a step back and regroup. But look at Hezbollah today. Alive, kicking. Israel hasn't solved that problem. The problem's unsolvable. Israel can't solve the Hezbollah problem. And so now they expand the conflict into Iran, because that was ultimately, that's what Netanyahu said. If we solve the Iranian problem, all the other problems resolve themselves. But Israel couldn't solve the Iranian problem, and they're not going to solve the Iranian problem. The Iranian problem is unsolvable. And now there's an election coming up. Where else do you expand this conflict? Turkey. And you're going to use Syria as the vehicle. And that's what all this is about. It's about Netanyahu trying to intimidate the Israeli people into, buying into his body of lies that he's the security guy. Turkey's now the threat. And you saw this. You've got Israelis saying that Turkey's a greater threat to Israel than Iran is. And so now what they're doing is they're trying to create the conditions of, conflict potential with Turkey. Are they actually looking for a war with Turkey? I don't think so. Because unlike Iran, Turkey can actually put Turkish troops on the border with Israel. And Israel can't beat them. Let's be straight up about the Israeli military. They suck. They're horrible. They got a lot of really good equipment, but they don't know how to fight. That was proven. I mean, you look at Hamas. They have some good troops, but generally speaking, the guys fighting the Israelis were just boys with big cojones. To crawl out of a tunnel and run across an open field and place an anti-tank mine on a tank and then run back. That's not sound tactics. That's just straight up courage. And the courage of Sinwar, the way he died, courageously, not flinching. Tactically, not much what they do is sound, but it's just courageous. And they're willing to die for their cause. You know who's not willing to die for their cause? The Israelis. Every time they die, the whole nation goes into mourning. They're incapable of taking serious casualties. And what happens when they start to take serious casualties? They have to back off. I mean, come on, if Gaza was really an existential threat, it would be solved today. It's not a difficult military problem if your military is willing to do what it takes to accomplish the mission. The problem with the Israelis is when they start taking casualties, they back off because they don't know how to take casualties. They don't know how to die. And you see that with Lebanon. You can take these villages that are defended by Hezbollah. I can take them. Give me my Marines. I'll take every single one of these villages. I'll lose a lot of Marines. Oh, we'll die. But by God, we're going to take that village. We're going to kill everybody in that village because that's what we do. The Israelis don't do that. They don't know how to die. They don't want to die. And therefore, when Turkey, let me tell you something about the Turks. And I mean, you know that coup that took place in 2016. There was a Turkish special forces colonel, the deputy commander of the special forces, who landed with about 40 special forces guys at the special forces headquarters. And he was going to take control of the headquarters. And if he did so, he'd be able to direct things, and the coup might have succeeded. The commander of the special forces was out about in the town, and he learned about this. He started making phone calls, saying, "Oh, there's stuff happening here." He couldn't get back. They tried to ambush his car, and he escaped the ambush. But as he's going back, he calls the command post, the NCO on duty. And the NCO on duty, I can't remember his name. He was a sergeant major, experienced guy, fought, and, combat veteran. And the guy says, "You're on duty." "Yes, sir." He said, "Okay. So this general's going to land with 40 guys. Kill him. Do not let him in the building. Kill him." "Yes, sir." "You understand what I'm saying?" "Yes, sir." "You understand this is the last conversation we're ever going to have?" "Yes, sir." Hung up the phone. The helicopter landed. He took his pistol, walked out there, walked up to the general. Bam! Killed him. He died. He got shot. Turks aren't afraid to die. And that's the thing about it. I'm not saying the Iranians are. I'm saying the Iranians don't have the opportunity to die right now. It's too hard for an Iranian division to get from Iran to the Israeli border. It ain't hard for a Turkish division to get to the Israeli border right now. And what Israel, hopefully their military understands this, that if they go toe-to-toe with the Turks, they're going to lose. The Turks will roll through them. Why? Because Turks ain't afraid to die. The Israelis are. Just look at the history of the Turks. The Turkish brigade in Korea landed in Korea because they were told, if you want to be part of NATO, you got to send troops to Korea. So they sent this brigade to Korea. The commander of the brigade was a veteran of Gallipoli. Gallipoli, you know the Battle of Gallipoli, okay? So this guy already has proven himself. He's a man who has seen more death than you could possibly imagine. Death ordering Turkish soldiers to charge the Australian trenches and then to defend against the Australian charges. So you're not going to scare this guy. And he landed his guys, no liaison, no English speakers, and no Turkish-speaking Americans joined up with them, and there were not too many English speakers among the Turks. So they just showed up, and they said, "Where do you go?" "Go north." The brigade moves north. They're moving north right at the time when the Chinese are attacking, breaking the back of the 8th Army. The U.S. Army's in retreat. Everybody's going. The Turks are like, "Well, we're going forward." A lot of Chinese around. "Hey, where's our ammunition?" "We ran out of ammo." "Fixed bayonets, babies." Boom. They died heroically. They died. Now they turned around and attacked the way back, but they never broke. They didn't surrender. They just died. And then they held it together, got reinforced, and they continued to fight. The Turks have one of the best reputations out there. So for the Israelis, they have to understand that when the Turks come in, the Turks are going to die to kill them. And they're not going to stop dying until they kill them all. This is where Israel needs to be careful about trying to pick a fight with the Turks. But see, Netanyahu doesn't care about Israel. And this is the other lesson you have to know as an Israeli. This man is singularly responsible for destroying your nation. I was briefed on this back in 1998 by an Israeli colonel who was responsible for preparing the national threat assessment for Israel, what their top threats were. And I will tell you that in 1998, the top threat recognized by the Israelis was not Iran, it was not Iraq. It was Israeli Jews, right-wing Jews. So this is the greatest threat to Israel. This is what's going to kill Israel. And they already proved it because it was right-wing Jews who assassinated Yitzhak Rabin. It's the right-wing Jews that empowered Benjamin Netanyahu. And he said, this will destroy Israel. This is what's going to destroy Israel. We're going to become a nation that's incompatible with life in the Middle East. Yitzhak Rabin, people may not have loved him, may not have liked him. Oslo Accords, people can pick away all one. But I will tell you this, having been there in Israel at the time, the Israelis that supported Yitzhak Rabin believed that there was the potential of peace with the Palestinians, and they viewed the Palestinians as people worthy of having a peaceful coexistence. Today, the Israelis here view the Palestinians as animals. Amalek was not a term you heard in 1996, not at all, not amongst the mainstream Israel. Today it defines. They're animals. You got Ben Gvir talking about, killing boys 14 and 16. We have to kill 30 or 40 a night just for the hell of it. Why? Why not? They deserve to die. These are animals. I mean, this is Nazi-like thinking. This is the reality of Israel today. It's a sick, broken state. And for any Israel out there who says that's not who I am, understand that's who Benjamin Netanyahu is, and that's what he's turning Israel into, and that's how you will be defined collectively going forward. But Netanyahu doesn't care about you. He cares only about Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's willing to sacrifice the totality of the Israeli state in order to secure power, because he knows that once he loses power, he'll probably go to jail, he and his wife, for the rest of their life, because they're two of the most corrupt people who ever walked the face of the earth. So this isn't about Israeli security. This is about the political longevity and political viability of Benjamin Netanyahu. And he took Israel from Gaza to Lebanon to Iran, hell, to Yemen as well. And now he's taking you to Syria to get to Turkey. At some point in time, if you kick the big hornet nest, they're going to come out and sting you to death. And I think that's the direction things are heading. And maybe the Israelis will wake up, because the Turks aren't playing games. The Turks aren't playing games. Turks aren't looking for a fight. They don't want to fight. But they're not going to sit back and let Benjamin Netanyahu dictate national security. Turkey has every right to negotiate base rights in Syria with the Syrian government. Every right. And Israel's saying that Turkey doesn't have a right to do that. So Israel's trying to impose its national security prerogative on the sovereign decision-making of Turkey. That is not a scenario that's going to play out in the favor of Israel. Now, they've bombed Syria thinking they're going to intimidate the Turks. I don't think the Turks get intimidated. As I said, just take your lesson from the Turkish brigade in Korea. Turkey will fix bayonets. Take your lesson from the duty officer on duty that day at the Special Forces headquarters in July.